Have you ever paused, even for a brief moment, and truly asked yourself, what happens when I die? Not as a passing thought, but as a deep, honest inquiry. Death is the one certainty we all share, yet it remains one of the most misunderstood aspects of existence. We spend our lives planning, striving, achieving, but rarely do we sit with the reality that everything we know, our body, our identity, our relationships, will one day come to an end. And perhaps that is why fear arises. But what if death is not something to fear, but something to understand? The Buddha approached this question not with belief or speculation, but with direct insight. His teachings invite us to look deeply into the nature of life, the mind, and reality itself. And through that understanding, something remarkable happens. The fear of death begins to dissolve. Because according to the Buddha, death is not a sudden ending. It is part of a continuous process, a natural unfolding of causes and conditions. In this video, I will gently guide you through what happens at the time of death, what continues beyond it, and how your present moment is deeply connected to what comes next. We will draw from ancient Buddhist texts such as the Pali Canon, as well as later teachings like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, to bring clarity to this profound subject. So I invite you to listen not just with your mind, but with quiet attention. Let go of assumptions, set aside fear and simply observe. Because in understanding death, as the Buddha taught, we begin to awaken to the truth of life itself. The nature of life and impermanence. Before we can truly understand death, we must gently turn our attention toward life itself, because in the Buddha's teaching, the two are not separate. One of the most essential insights the Buddha shared is the principle of Anicca, or impermanence. Everything that arises, passes away. This is not a philosophical idea to simply accept. It is something to observe directly. If you look closely at your own experience, you will begin to notice this truth everywhere. Your breath comes and goes. Thoughts appear and disappear. Emotions rise, stay for a while, and then fade. Even your body, which may feel solid and constant, is changing moment by moment, cells aging, sensations shifting, energy moving. Nothing remains exactly as it was, even for a single second. The Buddha compared life to a flowing river. When you stand by a river, it may seem the same from one moment to the next, but the water is never the same. It is always moving, always changing. In the same way, what we call life is not a fixed thing, it is a continuous process. And this understanding begins to transform how we see death. Because if everything is already in a state of constant change, then death is not a sudden interruption. It is simply another phase in this ongoing flow. The fear of death often comes from the belief that something permanent is being lost. But when we deeply understand impermanence, we begin to see that there was never anything fixed to lose in the first place. This insight is not meant to create discomfort, but freedom. When we accept impermanence, we learn to hold life more gently, more mindfully, and with greater compassion. And in that awareness, the boundary between life and death begins to soften. There is no permanent soul. As we continue this inquiry, we come to one of the most subtle and transformative teachings of the Buddha, the principle of Anatta, or non-self. This teaching invites us to look deeply into a question we rarely examine. Who, or what, are you, really? At first, the answer may seem obvious. You might point to your body, your thoughts, your memories, your personality. But the Buddha encouraged a deeper investigation. He taught that what we call the self is not a single, unchanging entity. Instead, It is a collection of processes known as the five aggregates. Form, the physical body. Sensation, feelings of pleasure, pain, or neutrality. Perception, the recognition of experiences. Mental formations, thoughts, habits, intentions. Consciousness, awareness itself. If you observe carefully, each of these is constantly changing. Your body ages. Your emotions shift. Your thoughts come and go. Even your sense of identity evolves over time. So the Buddha asked, if everything that makes up you is changing, where is the permanent self? What we call I is more like a pattern, a temporary arrangement of conditions, rather than a fixed essence. To understand this, imagine a flame burning on a candle. It appears stable, but in reality, it is continuously changing, fed by new fuel every moment. The flame exists, but it is not a permanent thing. In the same way, the self exists as an experience, but not as something unchanging or independent. This understanding becomes especially important when we consider death. Because if there is no permanent soul to begin with, then death is not the departure of a fixed entity. Instead, it is the continuation of a process shaped by causes and conditions. And seeing this clearly can gently loosen our attachment to identity and open the door to deeper freedom. The moment of death, citta and consciousness. As we move deeper into this exploration, we arrive at a very delicate and important question. What actually happens in the final moment of life? In the Buddha's teaching, this moment is not all chaotic. It is deeply conditioned by how one has lived. In Buddhist psychology, the mind is understood as a continuous stream of moments, known as citta. Each moment arises, exists briefly, and passes away, giving rise to the next. At the time of death, this stream does not abruptly stop. Instead, it culminates in what is often referred to as the final consciousness, or the last citta of this life. This final moment carries great significance. Why? Because it reflects the patterns that have been cultivated throughout one's life. If the mind has been trained in awareness, compassion, and clarity, the final state tends to be steady and untroubled. But if the mind is filled with attachment, fear, regret, or anger, these qualities may arise strongly in those last moments. The Buddha taught that this final state of mind acts like a bridge. It conditions what follows next. To understand this, imagine a seed being planted. The quality of the seed determines what kind of plant will grow. In the same way, the final moment of consciousness carries the imprint of one's karma and mental habits, influencing the next arising of consciousness. This is why mindfulness is not just a practice for peaceful moments, it is a preparation for death itself. Every thought you cultivate, every intention you reinforce, is shaping the mind. And ultimately, shaping that final moment. So rather than fearing death, the Buddha encourages us to gently train the mind now, so that when that moment comes, it is met not with confusion, but with clarity and peace. Karma and rebirth, Samsara. As we continue this journey, we now come to a teaching that often raises many questions: karma and rebirth. After the moment of death, what continues? According to the Buddha, what carries forward is not a soul or a fixed identity, but karma, the law of cause and effect operating within the stream of consciousness. Karma, in its simplest sense, means intentional action. Every thought you nurture, every word you speak, every action you take, these leave subtle imprints on the mind. Over time, these imprints accumulate, shaping your tendencies, perceptions, and experiences. In this way, your life is not. It is conditioned. And at death, these accumulated karmic tendencies do not disappear. They continue, giving rise to a new existence. This ongoing cycle of birth, death, and rebirth is known as samsara. But it is important to understand this clearly. Buddhism does not describe rebirth as a fixed person moving from one life to another. Instead, it is more like a chain reaction. The Buddha gave an analogy. Imagine lighting one candle from another. The flame continues, but it is neither completely the same, nor entirely different. In the same way, what is reborn is a continuation of karmic energy, not a permanent self. Based on karma, beings may be reborn into different realms of existence, such as the human realm, the animal realm, the realm of hungry ghosts, various hell states, heavenly realms. These are not necessarily eternal places, but conditions shaped by the quality of one's actions and mind. This understanding invites a deep sense of responsibility, because it means that your present choices are not insignificant. They are actively shaping what comes next. And in seeing this clearly, one begins to live more consciously, with intention, awareness, and care. The intermediate state Bardo, Tibetan tradition. As we deepen our understanding of death, some Buddhist traditions, especially Tibetan Buddhism, offer a more detailed description of what occurs between death and rebirth. This phase is known as the Bardo, which simply means intermediate state. While early Buddhist texts focus more on the continuity of consciousness, later teachings, particularly those found in the Bardo Thodol, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, provide a more experiential map of this transition. According to these teachings, after the physical body ceases, consciousness does not immediately take rebirth. Instead, it enters a subtle state where the mind becomes extraordinarily vivid and unfiltered. In the Bardo, there are no external distractions, no body, no familiar environment. What remains is the mind itself. And here, something profound happens. The mind begins to project its own content, images, sounds, and visions that can appear incredibly real. Peaceful or terrifying experiences may arise, but they are not coming from an external source. They are reflections of one's own mental patterns. If a person recognizes this, if they are able to remain aware and understand that these experiences are projections of the mind, there is a possibility for liberation, even at this stage. But if confusion, fear, or attachment take over, the mind is drawn toward another rebirth, guided by its karmic tendencies. In this way, the Bardo is not just a mystical concept, it is a mirror. It reveals the true nature of the mind when all distractions fall away. And this is why, in Buddhist practice, cultivating awareness is so essential. Because the clarity you develop in life becomes your guide in death. And in that space between endings and beginnings, awareness can make all the difference. Liberation from death, Nirvana. As we come to the final part of this journey, we arrive at the heart of the Buddha's teaching, the possibility of complete freedom. While much of what we have explored speaks about death, rebirth, and the continuous flow of existence, the Buddha did not teach these concepts merely to describe a cycle. He taught them to show that freedom from this cycle is possible. This freedom is called Nirvana. Nirvana is often misunderstood as a place or a kind of heavenly state. But in the Buddha's teaching, it is something far more profound. It is the ending of suffering at its root. The Buddha explained that the cycle of birth and death, samsara, continues because of three fundamental forces: craving, desire. Aversion, resistance. Ignorance, not seeing reality clearly. As long as these are present, the cycle continues. Actions create karma, karma conditions rebirth, and the process goes on. But when these are fully understood and let go of, the cycle comes to an end. This ending is Nirvana. It is described as the extinguishing of a flame, not because something is destroyed, but because the fuel that sustained it is no longer there. For one who has realized Nirvana, there is no more becoming, no more rebirth. So what happens when such a person dies? The Buddha remained deliberately silent on describing it in ordinary terms. Because Nirvana is beyond concepts of existence and non-existence. It cannot be fully captured in words. But what can be understood is this: it is complete peace, beyond fear, beyond suffering, beyond the cycle of life and death. And this realization is not reserved for a few. It is a path, one that begins here and now, with awareness, understanding, and the willingness to see things as they truly are. So, as we gently come to the end of this exploration, let us pause and reflect on what we have uncovered together. According to the Buddha, death is not an abrupt ending, nor is it a mysterious event governed by chance. It is part of a continuous unfolding, a process shaped by impermanence, guided by karma, and experienced through the ever-changing stream of consciousness. There is no permanent self that disappears, and no fixed soul that travels unchanged. There is only continuity, conditioned, dynamic, and deeply connected to how we live each moment. And perhaps this understanding invites a quiet shift within us. Instead of asking, "What will happen to me after death?" we begin to ask, "How am I living right now?" Because in the Buddha's teaching, the present moment is not separate from what comes next. Every thought you cultivate, every intention you act upon, every moment of awareness or distraction is shaping the path ahead. Death, then, is not something distant. It is already woven into life, reminding us of its preciousness, its fragility, and its depth. So rather than turning away from this truth, we can choose to meet it with understanding. To live more mindfully. To act with greater compassion. To observe the mind with honesty and care. And in doing so, something begins to change. Fear softens. Clarity deepens. And life itself becomes more meaningful. If this reflection resonated with you, take a quiet moment after this, just to sit, to breathe, and to observe. Because sometimes, the greatest insights do not come from seeking more, but from seeing clearly what is already here. Person with folded hands, thank you for walking this path with me. May you be well, may you be aware, and may you find peace.